All right, let's dive into one of the most secret, most ambitious, and honestly, most world-shattering projects in all of human history, the Manhattan Project. This is the story of how a handful of scientists, with the full power of the US government behind them, created a weapon that would not only end a war, but also slam the door on one age and kick open the door to a new and frankly, a much scarier one. And I want you to really let that sink in for a second. This quote right here, this isn't something we're saying with 70 plus years of hindsight. Nope. This came from the official report released right after the war. The people who built this thing knew, instantly, that they had uncorked something that was beyond nightmare fuel. This wasn't just a bigger cannon. This was a fundamental change on the rules of the game. So why? Why did they do it? Well, it all boiled down to one thing: fear. Pure, unadulterated terror. See, by 1942, the basic science of splitting an atom wasn't a secret. The real terrifying thought, the one that kept people up at night, was that brilliant German scientists could get there first. And let's be honest, no one trusted the Nazis to have that kind of power and not use it. So it became a desperate race. Now, to run this race, you needed leaders. And what a pair they got. Talk about an odd couple. You had J. Robert Oppenheimer, a genius theoretical physicist, super intense, the intellectual heart of the whole thing. And then you had General Leslie R. Groves, a tough, no-nonsense army engineer who had literally just finished building the Pentagon. Groves, the ultimate pragmatist, saw the sheer brain power in Oppenheimer and, in a stroke of genius, put him in charge of the science. One guy to assemble the minds, the other to build the secret empire they'd need. And if you want to talk about urgency, just look at this timeline. This whole thing came together in the blink of an eye. We're talking 5 months, from June to November. In just 5 months, they set up the entire command structure and picked a top-secret spot in the middle of the New Mexico desert. The clock was ticking, and they were running flat out from day one. So how on earth did they pull it off? Well, it took more than just a single lab. To build this weapon, they had to create entire worlds from scratch and keep them hidden from everyone. Think about it like this. Los Alamos, New Mexico, that was the brain of the operation, where all the design work happened. But the brain needs fuel. So they built these massive, sprawling industrial cities. Oak Ridge, Tennessee was built to enrich uranium. Hanford, Washington was built to produce plutonium. These places didn't exist on any public map. They were just gone. Secret cities for a secret war. And just to wrap your head around the scale, look at this. The small town of Richland, right next to the Hanford site, went from about 250 people to 15,000 in 2 years. That's not city growth, that's a population explosion, all to support the secret work happening just over the hill. It's almost impossible to imagine that kind of mobilization today. But these huge numbers, they were made up of real people. People like Ruth Hiddleston. She was one of about 10,000 young women at Oak Ridge called the Kellotron Girls. Day in and day out, they'd sit at these huge control panels, tweaking dials, watching meters, basically sorting uranium isotopes without having a clue what it was for. They were told it was for the war effort, and that was enough. Her words really get to that feeling so many had, a mix of duty and this quiet unease. And while these thousands of ordinary people were at work, a very different, very extraordinary team was coming together out in the desert. Yeah, back at Los Alamos, Oppenheimer was basically assembling the Avengers of theoretical physics. He brought together the biggest names from all over the world. You had Nobel Prize winners just walking down the halls, bumping into each other. It was this unbelievable concentration of pure brain power, all aimed at solving one single terrifying problem. And the problem they were facing was just immense. It was a true scientific gauntlet. They weren't just pushing the envelope, they were trying to invent a whole new kind of envelope. So the basic idea, right, is fission. You split an atom, it releases a ton of energy, and kicks out more particles that split more atoms. It's like a line of dominoes. But here's the catch. They needed that entire line of dominoes to fall not just fast, but almost instantaneously. We're talking millionths of a second. Any slower and the bomb would just fizzle out, blowing itself apart before it could really go off. Because the problem was so hard, they couldn't just place one bet. They had to make 2 enormous, high-stakes bets at the same time. The first was the gun method for a uranium bomb. It was pretty straightforward. You literally fire one piece of uranium into another. Simple, but getting enough uranium was taking forever. The second bet was the implosion method for plutonium. This was way more complicated, like trying to crush a basketball into the size of a marble, perfectly, from all sides at once, using explosives. It was pure theory. Nobody knew if it would actually work. And that total uncertainty around the implosion design, it all led to a single moment. The project's ultimate climax in the middle of the desert, the Trinity test. So here it is, the billion-dollar question that everything came down to. They were pretty sure the uranium gun bomb would work. So sure, in fact, they never even bothered to test it. But the plutonium gadget, as they called it, that was a complete wild card. Would the whole thing work, or would it be a dud, just a very, very expensive conventional explosion that scattered radioactive material all over New Mexico? They had to find out. And of course, you can't just test it on the ground. You have to be able to deliver it. That's where this plane, the B-29 Super Fortress, came in. For months, they used them to drop dummy bombs, which they called pumpkins, by the way, because of their shape and color, just to get the aerodynamics right. Then, on the day of the real test, B-29s circled overhead to watch and take measurements from a safe distance. I mean, can you imagine the pressure in those final hours? As if things weren't tense enough, a massive thunderstorm rolls in, threatening to scrub the whole test. General Groves, in his usual, let's say, direct style, basically told the weatherman that his life depended on getting the forecast right. This one quote just perfectly captures the insane knife's-edge tension of that moment. But the storm did clear, and at 5:30 in the morning, in a stretch of desert ominously named the Jornada del Muerto, the Journey of Death, they flipped the switch, and it worked. It didn't just work, it exceeded their wildest expectations. 3 years of secrets, the labor of tens of thousands of people, all culminating in a flash of light so bright it created a new dawn right there in the desert. So they'd done it. The impossible problem was solved. The bomb was real. But with that success, a whole new, even more difficult chapter began. A chapter full of questions about the world they had just forcibly changed forever. And what's so critical to understand is that the scientists themselves were the first ones to grapple with what they had done. I mean, get this quote is from a report they wrote in June of 1945. That's a full month before they even tested the bomb. They were already thinking past the end of the war and warning about the grave danger they were about to unleash on the world. And they were shockingly right about it all. I mean, they predicted the future. They knew a nuclear arms race was coming. They knew the US couldn't keep this secret forever. And they worried that a surprise attack would make it impossible to control these weapons in the future. They even proposed an alternative, a what if. What if they demonstrated the bomb's power on an empty island first, showing the world what it could do before ever dropping it on people? You know, the bomb wasn't the only thing the Manhattan Project created. Its other legacy is something we now call big science. It was the first time that thousands of scientists, engineers, and technicians were brought together, backed by a seemingly unlimited government budget, to solve one massive problem. That whole model, the National Lab System, huge international collaborations like the Large Hadron Collider, that all started here. So in the end, yeah, the project met its goal. It built a weapon that helped end a terrible war. But it also unlocked a power that's almost too big to comprehend. And it left us with questions we're still trying to answer decades later. The very scientists who built it were the first to say that these weren't just science questions anymore. They were questions for all of us. They built a new, more dangerous world in total secrecy. The question they left behind, the one we're still facing, is pretty simple. How do we live in it?